Okay, good morning, everybody. We've started our recording today for our federal fiscal grants communities of practice for April of 2023. And I'm going to share my screen so we can get started. So welcome. I'm so glad that everybody could attend today. And if you are watching the recording, I'm glad that you could get back and take a look at some of the good stuff we have provided for you, hopefully today. I'm going to warn you guys all right now, this is a little compliant heavy on the fiscal side, but it still can apply to program staff. So I think it's helpful as we blend and braid those positions to help each other out to be able to navigate these programs, that we both have a good sense from the program side and the fiscal side of how things work so that we can better help each other out to get through things. All right. So today, on April 18th already, we'll go over our normal what's on your radar. We're going to take a look at the data acquisition calendar. We'll do a quick recap from March. We're going to see for PD in 15, we're going to talk about the compliance supplement. I skipped over the federal program info of the month, the BABA, which is the Build America Buy America Act, in case you haven't heard of that one. And then we're going to do possibly a survey to see if you have plans to spend out all the ending pandemic related grant funds. We're going to also have a discussion on funds ending in the budgets, and then we'll take a look at upcoming May trainings for Medicaid and in the CFSGA. Okay, so let's get started with what's on your radar for April 23. I can't believe that, 2023. So we only have a couple of these things left before getting to the end of the month. And for April, we still have, I have highlighted here the dates you've got to get notification to your clerks of your budget hearings. So there's some stuff still coming up that we haven't gotten to yet. And then the fresh fruit and vegetable program grant applications are going to open up. And I think some of the staffing may have changed, but make sure that you're looking at the latest versions always of the data acquisition calendar in case any changes have been made. Okay, so let's talk about what's coming up in May. May is a big month. I didn't filter on anything because I just kind of wanted to show you everything that came up. There's lots of different departmental types of monitoring or other items that you're supposed to submit, possibly through IC submissions. Some of these are very specific program things, like some of these in blue here under special education. That top portion, a lot of those are program side reporting. So take a look at these, see who the SDE contact is. Notice that some of these you might not even be familiar with if you're the business manager, but it's always good to coordinate with your program staff and say, hey, special ed director, I noticed there's something about indicator 8. I don't think that's something I do. Is that something you do? Just make sure somebody at your district is doing it. Okay. Now I wanted to look at the updated enrollment and low income rates for public school finance departments. So if you haven't recently looked, if you had any changes that you submitted, make sure you go to see how it looks on the reports that they post to the school finance page. The SDE obtains your low income rates from child nutrition, and we're going to use these updated enrollments that you provided probably to Dean over in school finance when we do your allocations. And then a note for charter schools, if you submitted significant expansion information, the SDE is going to use your estimates for preliminary allocation purposes. Okay. And actually, I'm going to pause here for just a second. Stop sharing for just a minute because that's weird. Okay. Paused for a moment, but I apologize for that. I just want to make sure I was on the right presentation. It looked like it was off for a minute. Okay, so we're back up. All right, we're going to recap really quick for March for the federal programs overview that we did and position budgeting control that we talked about last month, and then the school board budget presentations, some of the tips that we went through. Okay, and so if you didn't attend last month, it's definitely worth looking back at because they went over, or we went over kind of a huge overview over federal programs. So if you're new to grant management, you're new to being a business manager, definitely one you want to go back and look at, because they did a really nice overview. This is a long list of who does what and all of what they do. And then they have a really nice program page that they shared, and they went into each program and did a really nice high-level overview of what they do and what they're about. So take a look at that. We also talked about why position budgeting is useful. It's really better transparency, reporting, trending, and forecasting ability. That top bullet right there. You can do anything by creating vacancies and freezing positions for later. You can quantify dollars saved. You can budget about attrition planning and payouts that need to be budgeted. You can track inflation. So all of these things are components of what you can do if you implement something like position budgeting control. And another, slide that I wanted to reiterate here is, depending on the different software, you can track employee credentials in some of those modules that you can buy or that you can implement. So it's just more robust reporting and analysis capability. But I always preach to everybody budget versus actuals. And I do that for a reason, because you need to know what your budget is and where you're at. You have to report to your board on this. You have to stay within your appropriation allocations that they have approved for you to spend. And we'll talk about some of that again later on in the presentation. Okay. And then we talked about a couple elements of strong school board budget presentations. Try and offer a balanced perspective, know your board, thank your board, make sure that you can tell a story that's understandable, focus on some of the important takeaways, bring your passion and your energy to tell the story, and make sure that you don't just talk about your needs, but that you talk about your successes. And then I always say to reflect on your mission and your plan. And then can you tie investments to activities from the prior year or the new year that you're asking for, so that you can show what you're trying to achieve? And can you leverage resources so that you show them that, hey, look what we're doing. We're not just asking for general funds, but we're blending and braiding and using other resources. All right, and then the communication and presentation really does matter. So make sure that you know who you're talking to. Don't assume that anything is too obvious, because it might not be something that one of your members understands. And if you need them all the way in, you want to make sure they understand what you're presenting on. So there were some really good slides in the last presentation worth looking at. So today, for our federal program of the month, we're kind of doing a training on a component of some federal programs. So some of the programs may have what's called the Build America Buy America Act provisions added onto them. I was surprised that special ed fell under that. So I need to make sure that anyone who has a special ed grant will have access to this training. So let's get into it. What is the Build America Buy America Act? Well, way back in 2021, President Biden, I know seems like so long ago, he signed into law the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And it included a provision called Build America Buy America Act. And I have links to it. And the act was meant to strengthen Made in America laws and bolster our industrial base, basically try and fund and partake in more American products and services. Okay, so what is the purpose of BABA? I'll just keep calling it BABA. Well, really, it wants to maximize federal government's use of goods and services, create demand for some of our domestically produced goods, and help us sustain and grow these jobs and to support the supply chains. Okay, so we're trying to support our own products, services, and staffing needs so that we can make sure that we help all those programs, so to speak. Okay, requirements. I have a picture of steel here because this is interesting. This is really a provision that this whole act is based off of infrastructure development, so to speak. So it's saying that all iron and steel used in the products should be produced in the United States, and manufactured products should also be from the United States, and construction materials should also be manufactured and produced in the United States. Whoa, that's a lot. So something to think about here. This is only specific to federal funding and only specific to certain federal funding, but sometimes we know we like to blend and braid funds to get something done. So keep that in the back of your mind as we talk through this. So the act requires that no later than May of 2022, which was 180 days after that enactment, each federal agency needed to make sure that these become part of their programs, and that none of the funds made available for these federal financial assistance programs for infrastructure can be obligated unless they have that use of iron, steel, and manufactured goods and products. So you might say, wait, that sounds too late. It's not too late because the policy comes into play as of awards after October 1st. So the awards for some formulary and discretionary grants that started the new federal fiscal year, which was last October, are just now coming to us at the state where they're giving us an allocation to give to you to start on July 1st of 2023. So this is new to you this July. So don't worry, we haven't missed the boat here. But again, it's really applying to infrastructure related programs and services, but you might even just be doing remodeling or a broadband infrastructure program. So it might apply to some of those. That's why we are going to go over it. Things you should know. Again, it doesn't appear on any of my grant awards or your grant awards prior to last fall, which started the new federal fiscal year, but it is mandatory. So when it's mandatory, it means it's mandatory for everything. So that means I even have to audit on it. So because it will fall under special ed programs, if I see that you guys put in something to do with a capital expenditure, I'm going to have to make sure that the BABA Act applies, and I'll be looking at what you're saying you need to buy. Okay, so again, the whole purpose of the BABA Act, we want to maximize American goods and services. Okay, and so that is it in a nutshell. I'm giving you all of the language. It's to ensure the future is made in all of America by all of America's workers. They want to make sure it's an investment that we can say we used our own folks and our own products and services to build and to better our nation. Okay, and I also have a list here, a link where you can find out, oh, shoot, does this apply to my project or my program? So I only have a couple snippets here of a couple of the programs because I knew that mine was in there. So when you go, if you click on that link, you'd be able to take a look at all of the programs that are federally funded and see if you have any of those other awards that this might apply to. So it does apply to, on the right side, you'll see the state grants 611 and then also the preschool 619 grants. So that's our Fund 257 and 258. Title was not in here, so everybody breathe. It wasn't, I looked, but there's some others that you guys may have. So you'll want to take a look at that link later to see if anything else in there applies to you. And you'll notice when you're in there that it shows the assistance listing number, which used to be the CFDA number, so that you can figure out if that's something that applies to you. So again, I have more links. Anything that you see blue and underlined is a live link if you want to look at these, but you cannot use their grant funds for any of these infrastructure projects or activities unless you apply with the following. I feel like this is over and over again, but I really want to just lay this down for you. So we know what iron and steel is, but we're going to go look at what manufactured products and what construction materials are, or what they consider. Construction materials could be any of the following non-ferrous metals, aluminum, copper, lead, any of those types of things. It covers certain types of plastics, composite building materials, some glass, even lumber, drywall. Believe it or not, a lot of lumber is imported. So we really just have to make sure that we're aware. And so then they also have a list that do not include some of these below. For like binding agents and additives. And then let's see what qualifies as manufactured products, because that's something you're probably wondering, well, what do they consider a manufactured products? But this is a nice little list that talks about it has to consist of 2 or more materials that have been combined through a manufacturing process. So think about how that works. Yeah, that's kind of odd, I know, but it's saying that the cost of the products components, that third little paragraph there, were mined, produced, or manufactured in the United States, and they also must be greater than 55% of the total cost of that product's components. So this could be a headache if you are trying to blend and braid federal dollars from grants that fall under this on any infrastructure program. So that's the reason I'm showing you the details, because if you were thinking, yeah, let's take 100,000 out of that grant and put it towards that, it might not be the best use of funds, depending on your area and what you would even have access to. So I also have a link that has a very long questionnaire here that you'll be able to look at. It's a nice questionnaire. They have good questions and answers in there. I just put a little snippet in there so you could see what it looked like. And it might be the answers to some of your questions. And with that, I'm going to dive right into the compliance supplement. All right. I'm going to take a breather. We have a big list. And I promise that we will make time at the end for you guys to chime in as well. So everybody's like, why are you so excited to talk about the compliance supplement? Well, I know I didn't even find out what it was till a couple years into my career when I was working at a school district managing grants in the fiscal office. And so when I found out about it, I thought, wow, this is fascinating. So I did know what a single audit was. And to understand what the compliance supplement is, we need to know what is the Single Audit Act about. What the Single Audit Act was the government coming in and saying, we want to take a deeper dive, a deeper look into certain federal programs, and they're asking your CPA auditors that you hire as a district level to come in and do these deeper dives on some of the fiscal grants. It's currently, there's a threshold set at $750,000. So if you don't have a grant that equates to that, that's a federal grant, they wouldn't do what's called the single audit. You will know if you have a single audit component because you have to usually pay a little extra money for your auditor to do that single audit. But basically, the Single Audit Act amendments are implemented through the Subpart F audit requirements of our favorite 2 CFR 200, the Uniform Grant Guidance, right? And it has all of the administrative requirements, cost principles, audit requirements for federal grants and awards. Okay, so that's my favorite 2 CFR Part 200. We train on it and talk about it all the time. So we know that districts have to have this deeper dive analysis done, the Single Audit Act. Okay, well then what is the compliance supplement? The compliance supplement is something that the auditors, your auditors that you hire, use to come in and do an independent audit on a federal program that met that $750,000 threshold. I have a picture of what it looks like over the right, and I have a link to the 22 compliance supplement. And I don't believe the 23 is quite out. And they make little changes year to year that are worth looking at. And usually there'll be a summary if there's any major changes so that you can just hone in on what those are. But basically the requirements for the compliance supplement are part of that 1996 Single Audit Act and the amendments under 2 CFR 200. And we're going to talk about what does that even mean, Lisa? But basically they provide for the issuance of compliance to help auditors know what they're supposed to be looking at. Well, why does that matter to us if this is what the auditors are doing? We want to know what the auditors are looking for. And this is good for both program staff and for federal or your fiscal staff to know. So let's talk about how we got here, a little history on the compliance supplement, because I was listing off all kinds of gibberish a minute ago about 2 CFR 200. What does all this mean? Well, they started looking at the need to do these single audits based off of, let's do a deeper dive at the program level. The feds don't have the means to do it. So then they want the local auditors to do that deeper dive for them and report to them on how districts and LEAs are using those funds appropriately. It started in '84. And then in '85, they made some changes to the Office of Management and Budget. And you might have heard the OMB Circular A128. It's basically just an audit of state and local governments to provide some more guidance and make sure that funds are being used appropriately. Then you may have heard of an A133 audit, and that came in the 1990s. And this was there for quite some time. And it added a circular to look at the audits of institutions of higher education and other nonprofits. But it's really all the same premise. They're all just taking a look at specific federal funding, how you guys use the funding. Now in '96, the president signed the Single Audit Act, and it became statutory audit requirement. So that's something important. And then in '97, they offered some revisions to that A133 to implement the '96 amendments and all this gibberish, basically just swooping in all the programs and products and services they wanted to be looked at. And then they changed the thresholds, because when it first started out, they only looked at programs that had a $500,000 grant threshold. And then they upped it later on to $750,000. Anyway, just kind of moving along the timeline. In 2000, they updated a lot of the terminology about internal controls and what they were looking for. They tried to simplify the audit reporting packages submissions. But then this is the part that's important, the A133 list of all the stuff they looked at, and it was kind of cumbersome and confusing. I say here that it yields to the 2 CFR 200 subpart F. All that is the uniform grant guidance in 2 CFR 200, okay? So they tried to say, okay, we're going to be superseded by this new updated 2 CFR 200. So it just changed the threshold up to 750,000. And they just defined some of the other major program determinations and processes. So it was just trying to simplify the process for everybody, because auditors were losing their minds trying to figure out what they were supposed to look at and what superseded what. Okay, now the 22 compliance supplement, I have a link here for you. It's basically, again, think of it as this is what the auditors look like. It tells them what they're supposed to go look for. It helps them, it assists them to perform those audits. It tells them what they have to look at, what they have to review, what they have to say is here or is not here, if you're compliant or not. And again, the whole premise of me wanting you to understand this is so you know what they're going to look for. So if you only have 2 programs that have a $750,000 threshold, it would behoove you to go look at the compliance supplement, know what your auditors could choose from, and just get familiar with it, whether your program or your fiscal staff. Definitely fiscal staff, because it will show you what they'll be sampling and it will show you what they're looking for. Why do we need it? Well, it identifies existing important compliance that are within that whole audit requirement, Single Audit Act. And without that, the auditors would have to research all these laws and regulations, and it would be really hard for them to do that. And there might not be a uniform view of what they were looking for. So again, it's uniformity. So it's equal what they're looking for, whether you hire a CPA auditor firm A or B. We know that they both have to look at the same conditions if they're going to audit you. Okay, so it's super important that there is consistency. Now on the auditing testing, right, this is the auditors going in, they focus on the very specific things that will cause improper payments. They look for fraud, waste, abuse, according to very specific tests that they produce, so that the awarding agency can take sanctions. That might be just freezing your funds till you fix it. You might have to pay money back. It's to stop fraud and waste. But I would say that most of you guys, if you make a mistake, it's a mistake. It wasn't, it's not that you were trying to fraudulently use money for something that wasn't allowable. It's usually you just didn't understand. But that's why we have audits. It's to help everybody understand how to use those funds. What were they intended for? Now we're going to shift the focus to performance. That was the other purpose of this whole compliance supplement. They want to make sure to continue to shift the focus of grants management from being too heavy on compliance to more of a balanced approach that establish measurable program goals to analyze and improve the results. Again, they're like, yeah, we have to make sure that this stuff is here, but the whole goal of this money is to help do something with a program that affects student populations and so on and so forth. So again, then they reduced some of the areas from 12 to a maximum of 6 areas that they review, which is huge. And this reduction again allowed for that focus to change, right? So that they could look more about performance. And it helped lead to more efficiencies because auditors themselves were more efficient and programs could be more efficient and consistent as well. But you have to know what the compliance supplement is so that you know that high level what they're looking for. All right, and then guidance. Let's talk about guidance for specific federal programs. The supplement replaces agency audit guides. So certain auditors from certain agencies had their own list of what they thought they were supposed to do because it was kind of all amok before that. And it gave them very specific audit requirements for individual federal programs. So we'll talk about that and see what that looks like here in a couple slides, but it is different for each federal program. So it makes sure that the auditors are looking at relevant information that is relevant to the audit objectives, and it gives them suggested procedures even. So again, for that consistency. So We all know that we switch audit firms every few years. You go out for a bid to see who else, just so that you don't always have the same auditor, and you should have a consistency in how they audit those federal programs. So the auditor's roadmap inside on the right, there's kind of a table of contents, just one of the pages, but it talks about a lot of different things that they can reference. And they are required to follow both of the provisions in 2 CFR 200, the Uniform Grant Guidance, the Subpart F, and this supplement. But it is their responsibility to understand and to process everything with respect to the scope of this audit and the listings inside that they have to follow. So that's on them, not you, but you should understand what they are looking for. That's my underlying message here. Now, I mentioned a minute ago about program-specific. Program-specific audits are performed. Again, if you only have 1 or 2 grants that exceed the $750,000 limit, then they would only choose from one of those if they're doing their single audit. But they have to look at that one specific program guide to do it. They're not going to use a guide from another grant. So how do they do this? Well, here's my humor for you. It starts with part 2 of the compliance requirements. It's called the Matrix of Compliance Requirements, and it identifies the various federal programs and the compliance requirements for each of those addressed in the supplement, and it associates the programs with the applicable compliance requirements. And I'll have a screenshot over to the right. That's a little picture of partial matrix. And it shows, hey, if you're looking at, it'll have the program number on the left to help you know the catalog of federal domestic assistance or the assistance listing. And you'll look at that and you'll look across and see, hey, are they going to look for allowable cost principles? Yes. Are they going to look at my cash management process? Yes. Are they going to look at equipment and property management? Yes. Are they going to look at matching? No, we don't have a matching component. Are they going to look at the period of performance? Yes or no, and so on. So this tells you what on a high level they'll look at. So this is kind of a high level matrix view. Okay. And then part 3 of the compliance supplement lists and describes the 12 types of compliance requirements, except for special tests that, and the related audit objectives that they have to consider. Okay. So it'll tell them the requirements and the objectives. That's all you need to know. And you can do deeper dives later. The auditor responsibilities, though, is that they have to be responsible for achieving those audit objectives for each program that they audit. And then they also have these suggested procedures to help assist with them. And then there's compliance requirements for special testing and programs that are unique to each of those programs. And I have a little funny here for you. Welcome to the Assumption Center. I think we all know why we're here. And I almost imagine our auditors looking at us saying those things. We know that we can't assume that everybody is doing everything right. That's why we have audits in the first place. It's to help us all, right? And it's to help us with quality control. So part 4 are the program requirements, right? They're going to go in and talk. It's a description of all of the procedures on a general level. And then it will get into some of the other complexities, and they will differ based on those complexities and the administrative flexibilities that may be afforded for some of those non-federal entities such as yourself. Some of it's based on the nature, the size, the volume of transactions. Some of them are tiny grants, so it's not going to be as in-depth as some of those bigger ones where they've got to do a deep dive on a huge program. Now, I also have a picture. I did a couple spliced screenshots. These are the agency program requirements. So this is part of that table of contents again, but I specifically did some screenshots to show some of ours. So kind of in the middle or up at the top, it'll show you like your title grants, your migrant ed, special education grants. It'll show 21st century. So you'll see all the ESSERs at the bottom here, but you'll notice they're all in here. And there's a section for each of them. If you follow on the right side, it'll take you to the specific area inside the compliance supplement where it gets into the nitty-gritty details for each of those. But it has a table of contents that shows you, here's the one I'm looking for. I can go jump to it. And then I want to talk about part 5, which is a cluster of programs. So a cluster is just a grouping of related programs. So this is like my special ed grants. There's a couple of them, but they're all considered special ed grants. You can look at your CFA as an example, and I have a screenshot in a minute. And although the programs within this cluster are administered as separate programs, we put them together in a cluster. And that can be treated as a single program to meet those audit requirements under the Uniform Grant Guidance. So here's a picture of somebody's lovely CFA. And if you don't know what that is, that's a schedule of expenditures of federal awards that's usually located in one of the last pages of your audit. And this is where you put the federal assistance listing in. That you tie out to that compliance supplement, right? That's how you can go find it. And it gives you you list your pass-through identifying number, and then you'll show your different expenditures. So this is kind of like your transparency sheet to show what did you spend from these different federal grants that you have access to. And you'll notice the ones I highlighted were special ed. You can see there's a couple different ones, but then you'll see the total special education cluster with the arrow there. And then there's different clusters for different groups, but your auditors usually help you understand if some of them will do the CFA page for you, some of them have you make it, but they will help you to determine what is in a cluster. So that's something to think about. Now, part 6 goes deep dive into internal controls. This is like your test. They're going to test, how did you do? Do you have the right things in place for separation of duties? Do you have the right controls to make sure that you comply with the laws and regulations according to the specific grant agreement? And it addresses all the objectives, the principles, components, all those things that are supposed to happen. So this is where it can really be beneficial for the program staff to understand what's happening as well. So all of these things are described on that one program level. When you go in and select your ESSER program, or you go select Migrant Ed, you go select Special Ed, it will then break it down, and all of these pieces are within there for each program. So let's look at some of those assistance listing specifics. So I'm choosing special ed right here, but it's like this for all programs. When you first get to the start of that specific listing, it will start giving you a couple pages of a narrative. And like for special ed, it talks about what is this Individuals with Disabilities Act. It gets into excess cost. It gets into maintenance of effort. It gets into everything. So honestly, the auditors have to go learn that, but it's all right there for them in case they select that as their single audit, so they can go hone in and become a very quick expert on it to then go analyze your program. Inside each of these specific programs, there's also another mini matrix, if you will. This one is for the special education cluster on the left, and it's going to show when you go in the deeper dive inside that compliance listing for that specific program, it will show you those yeses and nos from the bigger matrix, but it'll show you when you're looking specifically at that one program. And then on the right, I just did a snippet. It has a nice allowable activities section. It talks about what the SEA has to do. It talks about what the LEA has to do. And that is not all. There's like 4 pages of what the LEA has to do. So definitely worth looking at. And you can kind of go through and say, yeah, I could answer for that. Yeah, we do that. Yes, I know how to establish high cost or risk sharing funds. Yes, I know how administrative case management works. So it's program and fiscal when you get into those activity sections. Why is this important? Well, when you can apply your grant management knowledge and you know what the auditor is looking for, you can have success in your audit outcomes. Now, I have on the right here, sometimes you have to be your own hero. And I know it is the truth because sometimes you are the only one that can do it. So it behooves you to understand some of these things that I know it's painful to talk about, the compliance supplement, but you got to know what it is. So hopefully this has been a high enough level of, okay, I should probably go do that and learn about that, just to pique your interest and say, I should make sure I know what the auditors are looking for. I can be more successful as a program director and as fiscal staff to know that we'll be more successful in our audits. Okay, so that was a lot of Lisa talk. So now it's kind of time for discussion. We do have quite a few minutes. I have a little tiny bits of stuff here at the end for you, but discussion time is really meant for you guys to unmute and talk about things. I mean, there's this big legislative roadshow they've been talking about. I know that there's a lot of trainings. I have a slide about some more trainings coming up. There's the applications for federal funding. CFSGA is opening soon, and so is the IDEA app. And so we've been throwing a lot of trainings at you guys. So does anybody want to unmute and share or put anything in the chat, anything that's been on their mind? Maybe you're feeling like, what if I told you that the music in my head is not really playing? That's me sometimes. And it's, you know, sometimes you just feel so bogged down. So I want to make sure that we have space. Does anybody have questions about the compliance supplement? And I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes, and it might be awkward silence. Come on, everybody. I make it so you can unmute. Did anybody have a huge takeaway from, if I know they're still doing 3 more this week, but the post-legislative tour, did anybody have any aha or, oh man, any moments there, clarifications, questions? I work here so I can ask for you. Well, I will tell you something that somebody asked me when I was there at Post-Ledge Tour was about the staffing raises and if I was going to be able to give them raises for all the federally funded staff. So I said, I wish, but alas, no. So I do expect from the special ed funding that we'll probably get between a 2 to 5% boost, but I don't have my state allocation yet. And I just found out last week, I won't have it till probably the last day of April. So as soon as I get that, I will be putting together a quick webinar for you guys just to give you an overview of what your allocations are going to look like. And it'll be a quick one. I know that Brian in Federal Programs is also working on allocations for you guys. And I am watching the chat and I'm not seeing anything. Does anybody else have any other takeaways? I just brought back a slide that we did a couple communities of practice ago that talked about some of the funding that's going away and just keeping this on our radars, right? So that we know what those obligation periods are. I'm going to launch a survey later this week to you guys through Alchemer, and it's going to ask you for your intent to spend on the IDEA Part B ARP money, because a lot of you guys just haven't. And I can't spend it here at the state level. It's 100% flow through for you guys. And so if you can't use it, I'm going to try and reallocate it to somebody else. But really, I know you guys are blending and braiding and strategizing really fast and furious. So these are just something to think about. And anybody can open up. And oh, I did get something in the chat. I am watching. I have somebody mentioning the biggest concern is balancing Medicaid, general fund maintenance of effort, and IDEA at year end. And I will do a let's all try and tie our numbers out training. I'll probably do it late June as you guys are working on my IDEA app. We're doing a training that I will have listed on my training slide for you about Medicaid specifically, because what we know is there's a lot of people that just lost Medicaid services, right? Because the pandemic ending provisions. And then we also, so that's going to affect you guys in a couple ways. We'll talk about it in depth on that training, but then also the matching rates have changed. So it shifts how you guys forecast for balancing out. And I have another person saying, yeah, these percentages, all these changes, I'm going to try and help you guys understand that. It's so hard when there's so many moving pieces. And then there's mad spending at the end of the year too, right? Any way to increase funding since special education counts are increasing across districts? Well, I will tell you, as a state, we're getting that bump, we hope, between 2 and 5%. It may not feel like you got more money though, because you had ARPA for the last couple of years for special ed money. And it's probably going to feel like that fiscal cliff thing we talked about. Even if I gave you a 2 to 5% boost, you may not notice it at all because you lost the other funds. So I always try to keep it as lean as possible here at the state, because we, you know, we are held to the same staffing limitations. And so we're not going and hiring a whole bunch of staff. We're trying to keep a nice small team in place. But I think a lot of you will feel an increase of funding possibly because we haven't updated your information for allocations since 2019 to 2020 data. And I have some links here that I'll have in this presentation as well. The Julian Gideon presentation from PostLeg, and then also the other presentations, just another place for you to find them. Yes, and I have somebody also saying we just went to ADA. So yeah, you're scrambling because it's definitely possible staffing cuts. I know it's frustrating. I really was hoping that they would not sunset that provision on enrollment, but they did not. They did not decide to keep it going. And that's something that if you haven't been to the PostLeg tours, Julie and Gideon talk a lot about that. So we have the legislature giving you guys more funding in certain areas for certain positions and staffing and whatnot, but I know it is very frustrating how to spread that out. Yes, and someone else is saying it makes it so hard with students having so many more needs, and that is definitely for sure. You know, and that just brings up too that I know that you guys have struggled to keep folks staffed, right? To keep people in place. There's a lot of sharing of positions. There might become a lot more MOUs between districts to share people. Hey, can I pay for a 0.4 FTE of your SLP and you pay for the other 0.6 based on our needs? You know, what can we do? Blending and braiding. I know so many more needs. And I'm just kind of moving my slides along here slightly as we are talking, and you guys can unmute and talk about this too. I mean, I guess one of my questions for you guys, I know that some of our funding streams are fairly, you know, consistent, if you will. But like with special ed and some of the other, the formulas that we use, we didn't have that low income data set. So we had to freeze enrollment. We're going to up the enrollment to what you just gave to Dean in March for school finance, any corrections on your last fall enrollment. So at least we will have new enrollment numbers. And we talked about this on one of our prior communities of practice. It could make you a winner or a loser, because like for me on special ed, 85% of my calculation is based on total student enrollment. So at least I'm using enrollment and not ADA. I'm using enrollment, you guys. And then the other 15% is based off your low income rates. But honestly, some of you guys have lost enrollment. Others of you have really gained an enrollment. It depends, you know, charters are having a rough time too, because they really saw numbers shoot up during the pandemic, and they might have seen a lot of those dwindle back down now that the pandemic has subsided a little bit. So, or for the most part. And you know, that's just something you'll have to take a look at. When I send out preliminary allocations for special ed, I'll do a quick webinar. We'll talk through that, but I'll also, again, send it out as the caveat that it is definitely going to be preliminary, because we could have missed something. And so that's where I'm going to need all of you guys to say, hey man, my enrollment doesn't look right, or that is not my low income rate. Or, I mean, you really need to be able to address that and take a look. That's why I send those tables out before I upload them to the applications for funding. Does anybody have any other comments about like training needs? I was going to do a poll, but I changed my mind. So, because I'm liking that you guys are chiming in. I think you guys have uses for the funding. I think you guys have strategically been planning what funds and when. And you'll notice here on this training slide, we talk about, look at all these road shows. They're coming to you guys all over the state for how to use that CFSGA application for funding. And then for my Medicaid is on the 27th, it's a webinar. So, and I will record it and post it. And then I put at the bottom of this training slide allocation updates to be determined in May for me. And And then I see you guys are asking if the CFSGA amounts will be available for training. I can't speak 100% for Brian, but I know he's working on it, and his are very complex and there's so many funding streams. I know in past years, sometimes preliminary allocations will be based off of prior year allocations at the 85% or whatnot, or whatever it was that they give you up front as preliminary. And then they true it up with the real allocations and that last percentage that you get. I'm not saying it's going to be that this year, but I know that they're trying to be as timely as they can, and they will rely on you in the same way that if something does not look right, I can't even tell you how many spreadsheets upon spreadsheets we use. So there's a chance there could be an error. So take a look and make sure that, yeah, that looks like my enrollment. Yep, that looks pretty close to last year based on, everything. You guys need to help ballpark it. And I'm not saying that we are going to try to have errors. We probably won't, but it might just feel like an error for some of you that are losing a lot of enrollment. So just take a look at those. And I would say reach out to federal programs if you need more detailed information, but I know they're working on those hot and heavy right now. I'm prepping for mine. And my goal for you guys for the IDEA application, we already kind of did a quick webinar on some of the higher level stuff. For the application. I'm going to try and open it up early May, but again, I won't even have my allocations for you till the last day of April, they're telling me. And then I'll split it out fast and furious and upload it to the app for you. So does anybody else have any other questions related to upcoming trainings, or want to chime in on some other trainings that would be helpful? Like I could use a refresher on inventory training, or I could use a refresher on time and effort, anything like that that is helpful. Please let us know. We want to make sure that we provide that, even if it's a 15-minute overview in one of these communities of practice. Come on, guys, don't be shy. I'm going to move this down while we're waiting to see if anybody else has. Somebody says inventory training would be helpful. Well, that's something I've noticed in audits, is that people are like, I didn't know I had to keep an inventory on special ed stuff. Well, yeah, because you use special ed money to buy it, then I need to see how you track it. Do you have a sticker tag system? Do you know that little round circle desk was bought with federal grant money and it should stay in the special ed room and not get put in a gen ed room, things like that. So definitely we can put on a program training for that. And it applies to all programs too, right? You want to make sure that if you bought inventory with a specific program dollar, that it stays tied to that program availability. So I just have on the screen, reach out to us. I have special ed folks in here listed. I wanted to draw attention to the fact that we have hired a new contracts analyst, a fiscal specialist senior, Israel Silva. He's on today. So please send him a warm welcome. He has come to us from another department in the SDE here, and he is a wizard in Excel, and he's picking things up really fast, and I've got him helping out with those GRA claims to hopefully turn those over quickly to you. So please welcome him. And then a quick review about maintenance of effort would be helpful. I will put that in that year-end best practices, tie-outs. We'll just look at maintenance of effort, Medicaid, and the whole shebang. And I appreciate you guys being honest. Don't feel bad. That stuff's complicated. You've got maintenance of effort for special ed, but there's maintenance of effort for other programs too. And it's looked at in the background, where you're also simultaneously spending out of your general fund to support and supplement other programs. But we can usually see that and equate for that through iFarms data, but we do that on your behalf, and we only let you know if something doesn't look right. Trying to think for other things that you guys might need. We're going to talk about indirect next month. That's going to be a good one. Indirect is like an art. We'll talk about that. I'm going to have a couple of districts give me an example of why they implement that. And if you think about all these federal programs that you've had to implement, and your poor business office had to just jump in and figure out how to help administer, they need to have services paid for too. And I know a lot of programs don't like it when the districts charge indirect, but it's just part of the process. Yeah, and then again, I'm gonna just pop down here. A real big thank you to you guys to keep up the good work, because I mean, I looked around the room and I went to that post-ledge tour and there was a lot of stress, and rightfully so, but you guys, it's the final budget push, and I know they just asked you to tweak and change a whole lot of things based on some of those decisions that were made from the legislative side, but you guys, just one more little push here, and then it's time to wrap up and tie out year end. And I think I might have had the wrong slide presentation that I was presenting on. I apologize, because it skipped over my slides about, I had one that was asking you guys about data. How do you guys look at data to make data-based decisions? So we'll talk about that next month. But quite honestly, I don't know who uses data dashboards. Does anybody use anything like Forecast 5 or any other add-ons to their accounting systems that they can do for their boards? They can show where they're at. It's for appropriation tracking. I'll try and put something together for you guys. But appropriation tracking, meaning here's what my board approved. It's like budgets to actuals. And then here's what or how we track. So that's something that we can look at as well. And then again, I just have a big thank you. If anybody doesn't have anything, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes of your life back and I will stop sharing. Please feel free to email or call us. Sometimes we're not as timely as we like to be, but I just want to thank everybody again for coming. And we'll try and make sure that we get these posted a lot faster this month. And I thank you guys all, and good luck on your final budget push. And we'll see you next month on Communities of Practice. Bye-bye, everybody.